8 days adrift. One man rescued in a life raft. His mother vanished. The aluminum boat came back alone. The sea kept its secret. But the shore did not forget. Tonight, a fishing trip that began like any other and ended with a question that would haunt an entire family and a nation. They found him clinging to a small inflatable raft, his beard salt-crusted, his clothes stiff with brine. When asked what happened, he told rescuers the boat had sunk. No distress calls. No mayday. No sign of the only other person who had been on board, his mother. The thing that returned was the boat. The thing that didn't was a life. Please help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. To understand why a missing person at sea would become an obsession for investigators and a lightning rod for suspicion, we need to know the people on that boat, who they loved, what they hoped for, and the tangled family history that made this trip more than a simple day of fishing. Linda Carman, a woman who loved the ocean, according to friends and relatives, was 54 years old in September 2016. She lived a life marked by two things that seemed to tug at true crime stories: devotion to family and money in the family tree that made ordinary choices feel loaded. Linda fished alongside her son Nathan frequently. Fishing for them was a ritual. On September 18, 2016, she and Nathan set off from a dock in Rhode Island on a 31-foot aluminum fishing boat. Nathan Carman was 22 at the time. To the casual neighbor, he could seem like a quiet, private young man. But under the surface, there were threads investigators would later pull at: money that came to the family after the death of Linda's father, and a 2013 homicide that would cast a long shadow over the family narrative. Linda's father, 87-year-old John Chakalos, a wealthy real estate developer, was shot and killed in 2013, a murder that remains unsolved and that investigators long considered part of the broader puzzle around the Carmans. Nathan was the last known person to have seen Chakalos alive. Small towns and coastal communities wrapped themselves with quiet routines. The car parked in the driveway, the neighbor who notices the absence of lights. When Linda and Nathan didn't come home as expected, those routine observations turned into alarm. Their absence set into motion searches, phone calls, and a desperation that would end with a freighter, a life raft, and a single survivor returned to shore. The sea is indifferent. It does not account for motive, history, or grief. It only takes and keeps. On a night in mid-September, under a sky the color of old pewter, Linda and Nathan launched the boat into open water for what was supposed to be a routine fishing trip. They were expected back, but when evening turned to night and no one returned, friends and relatives assumed they had extended the trip. That assumption would be tested and then shattered. A week later, far from the place they left, a commercial freighter spotted a small, inflatable life raft bobbing in the Atlantic. Inside was Nathan Carman, thin, shaken, and alone. He had been at sea for multiple days. The freighter's crew pulled him aboard. When they asked what had happened to the boat and to his mother, Nathan said the boat had taken on water and gone down. He claimed he and his mother had abandoned ship and taken to the raft. But he was alone. Linda Carman was missing. Imagine the scene: a small life raft, a young man, the open ocean stretching to a horizon that gives no answers. He told his rescuers a story shaped by survival. The boat sank, they got into the raft, the weather turned, one person survived, the other did not. It's a simple narrative on its face. But investigators and some members of Linda's family would later point to details that did not fit that story: inconsistencies, missing distress signals, missing items that should have been on the boat, and choices that looked, to some eyes, like the calculus of a crime rather than a calamity. The boat that supposedly sank, which was later documented and inspected, returned to shore with curious anomalies. According to search warrants and subsequent reporting, there were signs that things on board had been altered, that navigational devices were missing, and that certain electronic records were not available. Investigators asked, why did Nathan not use a distress radio? Why was there no mayday? Why, if both had left the boat together, was only one person found? Those questions would grow louder as search efforts and records were examined. But it's important and humane to say this plainly: lost at sea is a devastating, confusing event. Bodies are often never recovered. Boats sink for many reasons. The ocean does not spare people because they are guilty or because they are innocent. It simply takes. Yet, when suspicion mixes with uncertainty, when there is a history of money, inheritance questions, and a previous unexplained death in the family, suspicion can become not only inevitable, but irresistible to investigators and the public alike. When a disappearance crosses from tragedy to potential crime, investigators assemble a mosaic of evidence: physical items, electronic records, interviews, and paper trails. This case was no exception, but the mosaic was made more complex by maritime realities and a family history that pulled the inquiry in two directions. After Nathan was rescued, the U.S. Coast Guard launched a massive search for Linda Carman. The initial response covered vast tracts of the Atlantic. The freighter's crew, whose quick action saved a life, reported finding Nathan adrift. They provided statements about his condition and his account. That account was the first piece of the puzzle and also the first place where questions formed. Why, investigators wondered, would the pair not have used their radio or other standard emergency protocols? Why was there no recorded mayday? Search warrants and later reporting revealed investigators treated the scene not only as a maritime rescue, but as a potential crime scene. They found the boat returned to shore with oddities. Some electronics were absent, and other items commonly used for navigation or ship safety were not accounted for. Reports indicate Nathan had disposed of or destroyed certain devices, a truck GPS unit and a computer hard drive, actions that prosecutors later highlighted as suspicious. The disappearance of a rifle later became part of the chain of suspicion because of its alleged similarity to the type of weapon used in the earlier killing of John Chakalos. Investigators did not look at the 2016 incident in isolation. The unsolved 2013 shooting death of John Chakalos, Linda's father and Nathan's grandfather, loomed large. Chakalos was an 87-year-old multimillionaire found fatally shot. Nathan had been the last known person to see him alive. Documents later showed Nathan had been in contact with estate attorneys and had asked pointed, chilling questions about inheritance timelines. While he was not charged in 2013, later prosecutors would say the two events fit a broader alleged scheme to access family wealth. In the years after the 2016 disappearance, another front emerged: insurance. Nathan filed a claim related to the lost boat. In 2019, a federal judge reviewed evidence in an insurance dispute and concluded that Carman had contributed to the sinking. That ruling led to denial of that claim. Civil rulings are not criminal convictions, but they can be persuasive to investigators and prosecutors, and they can create additional public suspicion. After years of investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Vermont brought a dramatic set of charges in May 2022. Nathan Carman was arrested and indicted on charges that included murder on the high seas for the death of his mother and multiple counts of mail and wire fraud. Prosecutors alleged a plan that involved deceit, manipulation of documents, and conduct that amounted to a scheme to obtain insurance and trust assets. The indictment tied together the alleged criminality around the 2013 and 2016 deaths and painted a picture prosecutors argued was motivated by money and access. Carman pleaded not guilty to the charges. Prosecutors' filings and news reporting summarized the sort of evidence they believed linked Carman to wrongdoing: electronic communications, bank and trust records, conduct around estate and insurance claims, and the strange handling of physical evidence, missing GPS, computer drives, rifle. They also pointed to behavioral evidence, decisions he made before and after the events that, in the prosecutor's view, fit a pattern. Defense lawyers pushed back, arguing that circumstantial evidence and speculation should not be conflated with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. As the investigation grew into a federal prosecution, the case captured national attention. Major outlets ran explainers, interviews with family members surfaced conflicting accounts, and documentary filmmakers began to explore the deeper family lore. That attention created a dual reality. On one hand, public scrutiny can clarify facts. On the other, media narratives can harden public opinion before a court determines guilt or innocence. In this case, the media spotlight amplified an already fraught set of questions about motive and meaning. In May 2022, the indictment set the stage for what would have been a high-stakes trial. The U.S. Attorney's Office presented counts that, if proven beyond a reasonable doubt, would have held Nathan criminally responsible for his mother's death and for a scheme to take advantage of estate and insurance systems. But the American criminal justice system has clear rules and a presumption of innocence until guilt is proven in court. The constitutional timeline and the wheels of justice were in motion. Pretrial motions, discovery fights, and requests for grand jury minutes became part of the legal dance. Defense teams sought records, including grand jury minutes, to test the government's presentation. Prosecutors, relying on their investigation, prepared to present a case that combined circumstantial and documentary evidence. But the trial that might have answered those questions never came. On June 15, 2023, Nathan Carman was found unresponsive in a federal detention facility. He died in custody. Authorities later said the death was not suspicious. sources close to the investigation reported the death was likely a suicide. With his death, federal criminal proceedings against him were effectively ended, and the question of judicial resolution, guilty or not guilty after a full trial, remained untested in court. What does it mean when a case ends this way? For prosecutors, victims, family members, and a country watching from afar, an unanswered question marks the close of a chapter without the certainty trials are designed to provide. Linda Carman's body was never found. Justice, in the formal sense of a trial and verdict, was not delivered. For some family members and for many viewers of the later documentary and news coverage, the death left a residue of grief and unresolved suspicion. For others, it underscored the limits of criminal justice and closing the emotional ledger of loss. There were civil threads that had already been tugged. The earlier civil rulings regarding the insurance claim remained part of the public record, material that, while not criminal findings, shaped perceptions and added texture to the story that would be told in documentaries, podcasts, and articles. Other long-form pieces took up the thread, interrogating family dynamics and presenting interviews that expanded the public's understanding of the people involved, even as those pieces reminded viewers that media tellings have limitations. There is a particular cruelty when a mystery that involves a death or a disappearance remains unresolved. Grief by itself does not require a verdict. But societies ask for answers. To name what happened, to hold someone accountable, to impose facts where loss created only questions. In this story, the ocean kept its original claim. It took one life and returned one man, while human institutions tried to piece together what that trade meant. We are left, finally, with several hard truths and several unbearable unknowns. Linda Carman did not come home. Her absence created a void that law, media, and family narratives tried to fill. Investigators pursued leads, prosecutors brought an indictment, and the courts became a stage for legal argument. But the most elemental curiosity remains: what happened on that dark stretch of water? We may never know. To the people who knew Linda and Nathan, to the quiet neighbors, the relatives whose names never make headlines, the Coast Guard crew who pulled a man from the sea, tragedy was not a story to be consumed. It was a life interrupted. As storytellers and as citizens, our duty is to hold their humanity in the telling. To name facts where they exist, to mark allegations clearly where they do not, and to remember that behind every headline are people whose lives were forever altered.